Should you pay more to get an RTX 5070 Ti in your next gaming laptop, or can you save some cash and get the cheaper 5070 instead? I've compared both in 25 games at 1440p and 1080p to find out. The RTX 5070 Ti laptop GPU has 28% more CUDA, Tensor, and RT cores compared to the lower tier RTX 5070 laptop GPU. But honestly, the biggest difference is the VRAM, as the higher tier 5070 Ti has 50% more VRAM capacity than the 5070, which will give it better longevity in newer games. Both GPUs use GDDR7 memory, but the 5070 Ti's memory is faster in all regards. Interestingly, the lower tier 5070 has a higher boost clock, despite the 5070 Ti having a higher maximum power limit. More power equals more performance, but also more heat. This graph shows the 3D Mark TimeSpy graphics score from each GPU at different power levels. Thinner and lighter laptops generally have lower power levels due to having smaller coolers. And with both GPUs running at 60 watts, the lowest power they both support, the 5070 Ti was only scoring 10% higher than the 5070. But if both GPUs are running at 115 watts, the highest the 5070 supports, the 5070 Ti has a bigger 22% lead. And then if we compare a full-powered 5070 against a full-powered 5070 Ti, the Ti has an even bigger 31% lead over the 5070. So technically a 5070 laptop running at full power could beat a 5070 Ti running at 75 watts. I could have power limited the 5070 Ti to 115 watts to match the 5070, but my goal in this comparison is to compare a best case full-powered 5070 Ti against a best case full-powered 5070. I'm using Lenovo's Legion Pro 5i to do this testing as fairly as possible. Apart from the expected GPU difference, both laptops have the same CPU, same RAM, same SSD, and very similar coolers, but they are slightly different. The cooler on the 5070 Ti is slightly bigger, but I can't do much about that. Laptops with these GPUs are not cheap, so if we find a good deal on the 5070 or 5070 Ti, we'll add it to the gaminglaptop.deals website. Save money on your next gaming laptop with that link below. The RTX 5070 Ti laptop GPU in red was using anywhere from 25% to 40% more power at the wall across 6 different games, which makes sense. It is a higher powered GPU after all. But as for the actual GPU power used, the 5070 Ti in red was running close to its 140 watt limit, while the 5070 in purple was slightly behind its 115 watt limit, though a couple of the games didn't seem to max it out. It's a mixed bag in terms of performance per watt. The 5070 Ti obviously performs better in games, as we'll see shortly, but despite it using more power, it ends up more power efficient in half of these 6 games. Sometimes the lower tier 5070 in purple ended up more power efficient, meaning it can be more efficient at times by delivering more FPS per watt of power used. It just depends on the game. More power equals more heat, and the 5070 Ti in red was a little warmer across all of these games. The difference isn't much, but it's definitely present, especially considering the 5070 Ti laptop's cooler was slightly bigger too. The lower tier 5070 in purple ends up reaching higher clock speeds, despite using less power, which matches what we saw from the spec sheet earlier. Both laptops have the same 80 watt hour battery, and the 5070 lasted 29% longer with the game running compared to the more powerful 5070 Ti, indicating the lower tier 5070 is more power efficient. Alright, let's get into the games. Starting with Spiderman 2, which has the biggest difference between the two GPUs out of all 25 games tested. The 5070 Ti was reaching a 43% higher average frame rate at 1080p and 65% higher at 1440p, a massive difference. Even the 5070 Ti's dips in performance, as shown by the 1% lows, were ahead of the average FPS coming out of the 5070, which just means the Ti is smoother and more consistent. But wait, it gets even worse with ray tracing and DLSS enabled. The 5070 Ti is still usable at 1440p and reaching 60 FPS, but it's 127% higher than the 5070, which was a slideshow in comparison. And the reason reason is that the 5070 is out of VRAM. Its 8 gigs aren't enough, so FPS suffers hard. Horizon Forbidden West is another game that easily eats up the 5070's 8 gigs of VRAM, which is why the 5070 Ti was reaching a 45% higher average frame rate at 1080p and 55% higher at 1440p, the second biggest difference out of all 25 games tested. To be fair, the 5070's FPS isn't terrible here, but it would have been much better if it had more VRAM. But then some games like Assassin's Creed Shadows, on the other hand, saw almost no difference between the two GPUs. The 5070 Ti is ahead, but the gap is nowhere near as big as those other VRAM-constrained games. Alan Wake 2 had more of an average difference, rather than being an extreme one way or the other like the last few games. At 1080p, the 5070 Ti had a 26% higher average FPS, though the 1% lows were very close. But that changes at 1440p, where the 5070 Ti's 1% lows were now 58% higher than the 5070's, and even above the 5070's average FPS. In other words, the 5070 Ti is running the game way smoother. The gap gets bigger with ray tracing and DLSS enabled, with the 5070 Ti reaching a 36% higher average FPS at 1080p and 42% higher at 1440p, where again, even the Ti's 1% low was higher than the 5070's average FPS. The 5070 is still usable in this one, it's just that the Ti is running significantly better. Cyberpunk 2077 was still able to run above 60 FPS on the 5070 at 1440p, but the Ti was 26% faster, which is actually a below average difference at this resolution out of the 25 games tested. The gap could be bigger though, as this game can run over the 5070's 8 gig limit in some areas. There's not much difference between the two GPUs at 1080p with ray tracing and DLSS enabled, and even the gap at 1440p is smaller than before, with the Ti just 22% ahead of the non-Ti. Black Myth Wukong doesn't need much VRAM to run well, and the 5070 Ti was 28% faster than the 5070 at 1080p, increasing to a bigger 35% lead at the higher 1440p resolution. Higher resolutions need more GPU power to run, so 1440p does a better job of showing us the true difference. FPS actually increases on both laptops at 1440p if we enable ray tracing and DLSS on balanced, though interestingly, 1080p results stay basically the same. Meanwhile, Baldur's Gate 3 doesn't really care which GPU it's run on. Both laptops run about the same at 1080p, while the Ti only offered a slight edge at 1440p with an 8% higher average FPS. Ghost of Tsushima only saw small differences at 1080p, with the Ti only 8% faster than the non-Ti. But then at 1440p, this game had the third biggest difference out of all 25 games tested, with the Ti reaching a 50% higher average frame rate. Sometimes the 5070 was about 10 FPS higher than this, but on average, it hit the VRAM limit and got held back. Instead of wasting your time individually talking through the rest of the 17 games tested, I'm just going to quickly skip through the rest of the results on screen now, so feel free to pause the video if you want to take a closer look at any specific game. The reason I test so many games is so that we can get a much more accurate average result from a wider selection of titles, which allows us to draw a better conclusion. In other words, more data equals more better. Let's take a look at the average differences next. On average, over all 25 games tested, at 1080p, the RTX 5070 Ti laptop GPU was 23% faster compared to the RTX 5070 laptop GPU. Some games like Baldur's Gate 3 or Hogwarts Legacy didn't care which GPU they were run on, while others like Spiderman 2 and Horizon Forbidden West were limited by the 5070's 8 gigs of VRAM, resulting in much higher FPS from the 5070 Ti with its 12 gigs of VRAM, stepping up to the higher 1440p resolution, and the 5070 Ti's lead increases to 33% higher average FPS compared to the 5070, with 3 of the games tested seeing a 50% or higher gain. The difference is bigger here because more load is placed onto the GPUs. 1440p has more pixels to generate than 1080p, and this resolution is closer to what most laptops with these GPUs will ship with. with. Here's how things look if we average the FPS from all 25 games together. This makes it easier to visually see the difference between both laptop GPUs. The 5070 is still able to deliver an above 60 FPS average at 1440p, even with my use of high and ultra setting levels. So then, is it worth paying more to get the 5070 Ti, or should you save some cash and get the cheaper 5070 instead? Prices of both will of course change over time, so check the links below the video for updates and to see if there are any current sales. If laptops with either of these GPUs have a good sale, you'll find them on our gaminglaptop.deals website. We update that every day to include the best sales. So make sure you check it out regularly to save money on your next gaming laptop with that link below. At the time of recording in late September, RTX 5070 laptop pricing is looking like a straight up scam. The lowest price we've had on the deal site so far is $1,100 US, with $1,200 to $1,300 being more common, so it's definitely worth holding out for the right sale. RTX 5070 Ti laptops aren't too much better at the moment, though this Vector 16 is a great price if you don't care about the 1080p screen. Anyway, we've had deals from $1,500 to $1,800 for solid models in the past. Most of the sales just aren't that impressive when I happen to be making this video. From a cost per frame perspective, buying an RTX 5070 laptop for $1,100 provides similar value to buying an RTX 5070 Ti laptop for $1,500. That is, you pay a similar amount per FPS of performance you actually get in games. In this case, the 5070 Ti is 36% more money, which sounds reasonable to get the 33% FPS boost at 1440p. The value gap I'm showing here would get bigger over time due to the VRAM difference, as newer games will start performing worse on the 5070, which would lower its value sooner. Don't get me wrong, an RTX 5070 gaming laptop can run most modern games very well, even at 1440p, but there are a number of titles where 8 gigs of VRAM clearly doesn't cut it anymore, and things are only going to get worse as time goes on and games get more demanding. And for that reason alone, I'd highly recommend saving the extra money for the 5070 Ti. If you're not able to, or just don't want to spend that much money on a gaming laptop, then just be aware of the limitations around the 5070 and set your expectations correctly. The 5070 will be more likely to have random performance problems and inconsistencies that will result in you needing to turn down settings, play at a lower resolution, or both, which are just compromises you shouldn't have to make when spending more than $1,000. The last thing you want to do is spend your hard-earned money on something that isn't going to give you a good experience that you'll be stuck with for the next few years. And that's why I teamed up with Steve from Hardware Unboxed to show the limitations of the RTX 5070 laptop GPU and its 8 gigs of VRAM. So check that one out next before you buy a 5070 laptop. And hey, if you are considering the 5070 Ti, maybe check this one next and see if it's worth jumping up to the 5080.